Well, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to be working on the bell housing on this Allis Chalmers WD. We're going to be putting a new seal in there, and then we're going to be mating that up with the torque tube that you can see over my shoulder there. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing, stick around because it's coming up. Okay, so here is our bell housing, and it's been pretty much completely stripped down at this point. Over here on the side that mates up to the torque tube, I've got a little cleanup that I need to do on that to get it ready for the new seal. But if we look in there, in that opening, I've got an oil seal right there that was leaking. And that oil seal is inside the bell housing where our dry foot clutch resides. So that's an important seal to have replaced and to seal up the oil. So there's a cone that goes on this side that kind of holds that thing in place. So what we'll need to do is drive the seal out this direction. Once we get it out of there, then we can go ahead and install the new seal. And then once the new seal is in place, and we can reassemble our clutch mechanism with the forks and the throw-out bearing. And I've got a new throw-out bearing as well that we will be installing. So for now, let me get a few of these parts cleaned up. I'm going to get this bell housing moved over to my bench where I can access it a little bit easier, and then we will get started. All right, so I've cleaned up the bell housing here. We're going to go ahead and remove the seal. You can just use a seal puller on this. I was going to drive it, but should just be able to pop it thing out like so. All right, so we got the old seal out, and you can see the oil and things that was behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up real quickly. Now I'm probably going to have to utilize the opening in the top here. I've got the bell housing, it's upside down here laying on the bench. So I'm going to have to use my access panel in order to use my hammer to drive that seal in. So that seal is 702-24687. Got that from ACO. And here it is. It's kind of a different looking seal. It's almost more rubberized than all the way around it here. But that'll go there. They do recommend putting some sealer around the edge of that. So I'm going to grab my Permatex and just put a little bit around that, and then we'll slide it in place. Alright, so I got my Permatex. I just put some around the hole there. I want to set the seal in place. You always have the spring side towards the oil. We'll get that thing kind of started here, and I'm going to tap it in, hopefully. Alright, I'm going to drive it in a little bit further. I just couldn't get a nice flat. I want to make sure I'm flat on that. So, alright, so just got a socket. Okay, now that we've got the seal replaced, our next step will be mating up the bell housing to the torque tube, which I've got laying over here on the bench. What I'm going to do is stain it vertically. I'm going to take these bolts out, and I'll set it on the bench, and then we can set that bell housing straight down on top of it. So, all right, so we've got the torque tube standing up on its end. I have cleaned the surface, the mating surface right here. And then I've got my bell housing connected up to my overhead crane. I've also clean the surface there as well. So I guess the next step would be we'll go ahead and put some Permatex, and we'll go ahead and get our gasket setting here on the torque tube side. And then once we get that in place, then we'll be ready to make those two halves up. So I'm just going to run some Permatex around the oil areas. So all of this is in oil here. That's just about it, really. I mean, nothing too major here. All right, we'll get our new gasket, put it in place. Now this gasket fits both this connection and the area that connects up with your rear end right at your transmission. This hole right here, if you remember on the other side there, it's a lot larger. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out to mate up with the other half of this, and that'll allow full oil flow in there. So give me just a sec, we'll get that thing cut out and then we'll be ready. Okay, so looking over there on the ground at the rear end and transmission housing, that's the gasket that will need cut. This one here just mates up with a flat surface. If we look here on the bottom, it would be right here. So there's nothing there to worry about cutting out. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and add some additional sealer around the top here. That way when we mate our halves up, everything will be good. All right. Now the fun part. We'll bring the other half over and ease it down. One thing you want to make sure to do is, if you have had your hydraulic pump off and you've taken your bolts out, make sure you get your bolts back in before you assemble that hydraulic pump. So I made that mistake and didn't do it, so I had to pull that back off. But either way, just make sure that you get that, get those bolts set. And obviously too, as we come down, it won't be able to set all the way down flush. We'll have to get these both started probably 1/2 inch in before it will come all the way down. One additional thing that you want to do is lube up your input shaft right here. Right here is where that seal is going to be. So I'm going to leave that. You want to make sure there's no burrs or anything right here on the shaft itself. And then I'm going to put a little bit of lube up there in the new seal that we put in just a few minutes back. So a little bit of prep work to do that, and that should let everything slide together fairly easily. So all the way to do it, I got to get up on top here. Okay, I've got to be close enough to need to start tightening. So let's flip back down here. Okay, so I got my two bolts right here that I want to go ahead and get started. Okay, so I got it lined up now and just getting these bolts in here, with them finger tight. I like to put new lock washers on everything. A lot of times I'll reuse the bolts, but I'll put new lock washers on. Everything looks good on my seal. Inside here as well. Chain out of the way. Everything looks fine on it. All right, so I'll just finish tightening these up all the way around. All right, so I'm just getting the torque tube and the bell housing portion just set up here on my bench. Lots of weights in here. So it's still setting on the bottom of that PTO. So I want to get me another block right here, and then we should be pretty good shape. Alright. So a 2 to 6 will probably get us. Yep. Alright, so we got that thing situated. One thing I want to note too is I built this this workbench. I've got 1/2-inch steel top on it, and then 2x6 frame, and then a 6x6 for the uprights with a little shelf. But now at the bottom, I've got those casters, and those casters could roll out. So while I'm working, I always put a 6x6 block up underneath the edge of that. That way, if that caster would happen to blow out of there, it's not going to smash my toes if it's underneath that. It'll just set down on the block. So I also wear steel-toed boots, as I've mentioned before. All right, enough of that. We're going to take my lift points off of here. That's how I got it picked up earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get that stuff off, and that will give us access to what we need to finish up this project. All right, so I've got the torque tube and the bell housing laid flat here on the bench so that I can work on the shifting fork and the shifting fork shaft and the whole mechanism for engaging the foot clutch. So step one, we're going to slide on the shifter bracket, which is this tube. It just slides over like so. And I don't believe it matters which direction here. I can see that that's where my old hardware was. So we'll go ahead and get our bolts in both sides. All right, next will be the shifting fork shaft and the clutch lever, and we'll put some Lucas on this just to let everything slide good. Now when this comes in one side, we're going to have to slide the fork on it as well. So it comes through as you're setting on the tractor from the left. We get our shifting fork, and the ear that you see right here is what's going to be pushing against your throwout bearing. So we want to make sure that that's forward. So we got that slid on there. In the bottom, there is a spot for this bolt to push up through there, and that will center up and get everything where it needs to be. So we're probably not too far off. So I'll go ahead and get this started. And if I've got enough room, yep, I do. Hitting that block of wood. So that pretty much centered itself up in the hole, and then we'll tighten down the lock. Okay, so that will push our throwout bearing mechanism forward. There's a spring right here that's going to be pulling through this opening, and it will lock onto the portion right here where you got your grease fitting. I'm putting a new throwout bearing on this, so I need to get that replaced next before we slide this on. So with that said, let's slide over here to the bench and we'll get that replaced. Okay, so we need to drive that bearing off. The best way I found to do it is if you can just get a socket that'll fit in there. In this case, I can put this 1.25 inches. It'll fit in there. It's got that little shoulder that'll hold, and I should be able to just drive that thing off. Okay. All right, so we got the throwout bearing off of there. Set it off to the side here. I'm going to clean that edge out where our new bearing is going to be going. It's pretty nasty. There's a couple of little holes in it right here that's where the grease goes in that are plugged. So I'm going to get that cleaned out. Okay, I got those holes cleaned out. So we'll just flip this over and we're going to install our new throwout bearing. And I don't have the part number out of the book, but here's the part number that I got. It's on the box, AB-1928D. It looks like this will fit the B, the IB, the D10, D12, RC, WC, WD, and WD-45. So you can see you've got this little notch in it right there. That needs to go in, and we'll put it down here by where the hole is. So we'll just slide that over like so. And we'll make sure it's lined up. If you can see down in there, we've got that little notch you can see right there lined up. So I'm just going to drive that on. Get even pressure all the way around. Okay, so that is it. That throwout bearing's now installed. Just looking down in the housing here, you can see right there in the bottom, that's where the grease is going to come out. So what I want to do is go ahead and hook my grease gun up to that fitting, and I want to blow out all that old grease, and that way if there's any junk in there, I'm going to get that out before I slide it on the shaft. Alright, so we'll go ahead and clean out the grease that's in there. Got one of these lock and lube fittings, and they are nice. Alright, so we can see the new grease in there. So it just ensures that everything is cleared out, and I got any old grease that's in there out. All right, now that we got the grease cleaned up, we're just going to slide the mechanism over our shaft back here, just like so. And there's some of that grease that was in there left over. And then right here where the connection is for your grease gun, on the bottom side here, actually you can see it, that spring back in there. I'm going to get my needle nose pliers on that. I'm going to pull it around. It's just going to fit right in that little groove right there. And so now we've got some tension on our clutch, and I'm moving the lever over here, and everything's working as it should. All right, so we've got the throwout bearing is installed and ready. And really at this point, we've got all of the belt housing portion, torque tube rebuilt, resealed, and we'll be working on the rest of that rear end section in some future videos. So if you have any questions or comments, stick them in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and share the video. Thanks for watching.